Welcome to the third and final part of our summer series, The Whimsy of Disney. Today we take a look at Walt Disney's obsession and a film that was, at once, a disappointment to Walt personally, but has gone on to become one of his most beloved and classic films. Walt Disney had a lifelong fascination with Alice in Wonderland, a story that captured his imagination from the very beginning of his creative journey. Lewis Carroll's whimsical world of nonsense, surreal logic, and curious characters seemed tailor-made for animation and for Disney. It became a recurring muse throughout his life. Yet despite decades of dreaming, planning, and reworking, Disney's 1951 feature-length adaptation of Alice in Wonderland ultimately left him disheartened. The film, while visually stunning and rich in characters, failed to resonate with audiences the way he'd hoped. To understand Disney's disappointment, one must explore both his early connection to the story and the many creative struggles that led to its release. Prior to the release of Alice in Wonderland in 1951, Walt Disney Studios had already revolutionized the animation industry and cemented its place in cinematic history. The studio's groundbreaking debut feature Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937 was the world's first full-length animated film and a massive box office success, proving animation could rival live action in emotional depth and storytelling. This was followed quickly by a string of artistic and technical triumphs, including Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi, each pushing the boundaries of animation in unique ways. During World War II, the studio contributed significantly to the war effort through propaganda and training films. By the late 1940s, Disney had returned to form with hits like Cinderella, which reaffirmed the studio's creative and commercial power. With a growing empire that included live-action films, music production, and character merchandising, Walt Disney Studios had become a dominant force in global entertainment, setting the stage for ever more ambitious storytelling, like their long-awaited adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. Walt Disney's first foray into the world of Alice in Wonderland actually began in the early 1920s, long before Mickey Mouse ever appeared on the scene. As a young animator in Kansas City, Walt created a series of shorts known as the Alice comedies, blending live-action footage of a little girl named Alice with cartoon backgrounds and characters. These films were a unique experiment in combining fantasy with reality, and they gave Disney his first real taste of success. The choice of Alice as a character was no accident. Walt was captivated by the strange, dreamlike quality of Carol's world, a place where rules didn't apply and anything could happen. It was, in many ways, a perfect match for a man whose entire career would revolve around turning fantasy into reality. Speaking of Wonderland, Walt once said, "No story in English literature has intrigued me more than Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. It has fascinated me ever since I first read it as a schoolboy." As the Walt Disney Studio grew, Alice in Wonderland remained a project Walt revisited repeatedly. By the late 1930s, after the smashing success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Disney was actually developing several literary adaptations, including Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. His team created concept art, wrote drafts, and even recorded audio tests. However, the project stalled numerous times, largely because Disney himself could not quite crack the emotional core of the story. Unlike Snow White and Pinocchio, Alice lacked a clear moral arc or central villain. The episodic nature of the book, charming as it was, proved difficult to adapt into a satisfying narrative for the screen. When Alice in Wonderland was finally released in 1951, it had gone through numerous rewrites and artistic overhauls. While the animation was some of the studio's most inventive and colorful to date, the film was met with lukewarm reception from both critics and audiences. Many viewers found it too chaotic, too strange, and lacking the heart they'd come to expect from a Disney film. The British press, in particular, criticized it for taking too many liberties with Lewis Carroll's original text. Even Disney himself was disappointed. He felt that the film had become a collection of disconnected gags rather than a cohesive story. He reportedly said that the film lacked warmth and that Alice was too passive and hard to connect with emotionally. Part of Disney's dissatisfaction may have stemmed from the fact that, in trying to be faithful to the original material's absurdity, he sacrificed his usual approach to storytelling. Disney was a master of emotional connection, of taking audiences on a journey of growth, transformation, and heartfelt resolution. But Alice in Wonderland doesn't follow that path. Alice doesn't really learn a valuable lesson or change significantly by the end of her journey. She simply wakes up. In many ways, it defied the traditional Disney formula, and the result felt, to Walt, more like a series of impressive set pieces than a unified whole. On the disappointment in the reaction of audiences upon release of Alice in Wonderland, Walt said, "The picture was a little too wacky for audiences. They didn't quite know what to make of it." Ironically, the very elements that frustrated Walt Disney, the bizarre logic, the surreal visuals, the lack of sentiment, are what have made Alice in Wonderland endure with audiences in the decades since. The film found a new life in the 1960s, embraced by the counterculture movements who saw its psychedelic style as a reflection of their own sensibilities. It's since become one of the most beloved entries in the Disney canon, even if its creator never felt satisfied with it. In the end, Alice in Wonderland represents both the brilliance and the limits of Walt Disney's vision. It was a story he loved, one that shaped his earliest work and continually sparked his imagination. But in adapting it, he encountered the rare story that resisted his methods, a dream that refused to be tamed. His disappointment was not in the failure of the film, but in its failure to become what he'd always dreamed it could be. Nowadays, it's hard to find people that haven't watched the film, or people who don't absolutely love it. The color, the characters, and even the wackiness of it all ended up being what modern audiences gravitate to most. In a twist no one saw coming, Japanese culture has developed a deep and enduring love for Disney's Alice in Wonderland, embracing its whimsical aesthetic, surreal imagery, and dreamlike narrative in ways that go well beyond the Western interpretation. In Japan, Alice has become a cultural icon, inspiring everything from fashion lines and themed coffees to anime and pop art. The character of Alice, with her wide-eyed curiosity and detached elegance, aligns closely with the Japanese concept of kawaii, or cuteness, while also embodying a sense of wonder and quiet rebellion that resonates with youth culture. Disney's stylized version of the story, with its bold colors and eccentric characters, fits seamlessly into Japan's appreciation for the fantastical and the visually rich. Over the decades, Alice in Wonderland has grown into more than just a film in Japan. It's become a lifestyle aesthetic, a cosplay staple, and a creative symbol that continues to inspire artists, designers, and storytellers alike. As a young boy, I didn't grow up with the Disney movies as much as I did Disney animated shorts. I was always more familiar with the traditional exploits of Mickey, Donald, Goofy, and Pluto than I was with Cinderella and Snow White. But there were films that I ended up seeing on VHS, in those giant clamshell cases everyone used to have. While The Sword in the Stone will always be my favorite Disney film, I did see Alice in Wonderland when I was young, and I got it back then. I was never huge on cartoons with musical numbers as a little kid, but both Sword and Alice have smaller, more fun little songs that I think gave me permission to enjoy them without wondering why someone was breaking into song in the first place. I've learned to appreciate the musical genre since then, with the help from my wonderful wife, and it just so happens that Alice in Wonderland has always been her all-time favorite film. And it makes sense to me. What's not to like about a place where your imagination is allowed to run wild and where the people or animals you meet are quirky, fun, and keep you guessing? The world we live in today is certainly filled with nonsense. Maybe not the whimsical nonsense Alice dreams of, but it often doesn't make any sense. But if we can find the beauty and color of even the darkest parts of this world, maybe, just maybe, we'd all have a world of our own. Thank you for joining me on this 3-part summer series. I hope you enjoyed our look at Walt Disney Animation and what exactly the magic of Disney is all about. Do me a favor, click the subscribe button and tell your family and friends about the podcast. It's my goal to reach as many listeners as I can from my little corner of the world each week. There's a long way to go, but with your help, I'm sure I can get there. So share the podcast with those you know that might appreciate it and submit a film for a future episode. Have a wonderful summer, and when you can no longer take the heat and humidity, head inside, find a dark, cool room, and pop in one of your favorite films. I'll see you next time.